Crazy seeing all the people coming.
Good evening, everyone, and
Mr.
welcome
Nigel.
to this week's Agile London. Hope everyone is good. As you can see, and as you've sort of seen on the advertising, we've got a slightly different format this week. Have really been quite excited about this one. So just to quickly introduce myself, my name's Alex Scriven. I work for Oliver Bernard, and as many of you on here know, have hosted Remote Agile London pretty much every Wednesday since the beginning of April, continuing to get really great feedback and really great interest in these events. So firstly, thank you to everyone for joining. Just a couple of house rules before we really kick off. Can I please ask that you all remain on mute throughout this session? It really helps with the fluidity of the session and allows our speakers to deliver the answers that we all want to hear. And as I said, this week is a bit of a different style. You know, to much of your joy, I'll be a little bit more involved this week, and we'll be essentially having a good conversation with our two speakers, Arif and Cuan. I really do actively encourage questions though, and I want you all to be as involved as you possibly can. I have sort of prepared for this and do have my questions ready for Arif and Cuan, but if you have any questions, and as I say, I really would welcome them, please privately message them to me in the chat at the bottom, and I will ask them on your behalf. So, you know, at any point throughout this session, please do put your questions into the chat at the bottom, and I will ask Cuan and Arif. So, as I said, it's been a bit more of a conversational evening with me involved this week. So I've got Arif Harbott and Cuan Mulligan, and they are the authors of the HERO Transformation book. Arif is a high-growth CTO and digital leader who has helped launch and scale both startups and new businesses within within PLCs. His career has centered on organizations undergoing large-scale change, including scaling startups, FTSE 100 companies, and government entities. Arif has held senior technology roles at Lloyds Banking Group, Morrisons, Booker Group, and the UK government. In these roles, he's managed technology budgets of over £1 billion, P&Ls of over 900 million, and led technology teams of over 1,000 people. Welcome, Arif. It's great to have you with us. We've also got Cuan Mulligan. Cuan is, I know Cuan quite well, digital transformation executive who has led and worked on some of the largest transformation programs in Europe over the last 15 years across TMT, online retail, gambling, banking, and government. A digital native with an engineering background, he has held transformation leadership roles in successful large-scale adoption, organization design, and digital transformations that have positively impacted thousands of people. Cuan developed his strategies for successful implementations while running his own consultancy and working with PayPal, bwin, McKinsey Digital, Schroders, and the UK Government Digital Service. And I hear he's also taught Arif a few things over the years. So, very big welcome to you both. Thank you very much for joining us. So, first off, how did you two meet?
We met when I was running the technology and digital teams for the Ministry of Justice. So it was a pretty large department. It's about 120,000 people. It was about a technology team was about 1,400 people. I arrived on the kind of role new in, and I realized that the teams, whilst they were proposing to use Agile, when we had like dozens and if not hundreds of teams working all over the place, we needed some kind of scaling strategy, somewhere bringing this all together coherently. I reached out to my brother. Many of you might know Arif Harbott. He works very much in the Scrum and Agile space. He recommended Cuan. Cuan and his partner at the time, Steve, came in to help me. We did a kind of target operating model and tried to move the team much more towards kind of a more productive and I guess a more efficient way of working, a little bit less disjointed. So, and then from there, we've spent the last 5 years debating and talking about Agile and product development and all things technology. I kind of come at it from a running large teams executive point of view. Cuan comes at it much more from a kind of coach delivery, working on the ground with teams, and hopefully we're bringing the best together of both of those worlds.
Yeah, it's been, you say talking, that was probably a polite version of some of the heated debates and arguments we've had over the many, many years in bringing this to life. But I think it's the combination of these two perspectives. I think sort of coming from the purest agile world, you can get caught up in a lot of the rhetoric and the books and the theory, and it sounds great. And then you're coming from the sort of the executive side of the equation, where you're under actually quite significant pressure that maybe you don't always feel or experience at the sort of the agile coach level. And bringing those two worlds together has been a really interesting journey.
Sounds good. So you two have, as I sort of touched on, have co-authored the HERO Transformation Playbook. Do you want to just let us all know, what that is and how it came about, and give us a bit of an intro and a brief on it?
Sure. So probably worthwhile just initially starting with the word hero, or the name in that. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to do a startup. Getting domain names is a complete pain in the arse. And I had HERO from a previous startup that I did, and what it actually used to stand for was hypothesis executed, results observed. And it was an assessment framework that I was using for my teams in terms of agile adoption. And so that was the origin of the name that we folded into the transformation framework. And what we were taking was, we're trying to figure out why have some agile adoptions work while others have not. Arif has been involved in many sort of wider organizational transformations and figuring out why they worked and didn't work. And broadly, we started with this idea that a lot of organizations who are doing adoptions or transformations don't do sufficient time on the designing of that, and really get into terms of what is the problem that they want to fix. And then secondly, you have a lot of organizations who might use PMOs or agile PMOs to do the delivery or the execution part of the transformation. And they don't have a consistent methodology or framework or approach to actually do the delivery as well. So that was sort of the starting position that we had, to have a design phase and then a delivery phase of the actual overarching framework. I don't know if you want to speak a bit more detail of either of those.
I'd say a little bit was born out of frustration, wasn't it? Like, we were frustrated that a lot of the books we were reading on change management and in this space were very high level. They were very philosophically aligned to what we were talking about: bring people with you, make sure that change is the right thing to do, all these kind of nice, kind of a bit more esoteric or fluffy concepts. But we wanted detail. We're like, no, how do you actually do that? How do you bring people with you? How do you do the planning? How should you run this meeting? How long should it be? Who should be in it? What topics should we be talking about? And we were left wanting more. And it was so frustrating. We thought, you know what, we're going to have a go at doing this. And 5 years later, we were still doing it. And it's taken us a long time, because when you get down to that level of detail, you have to be very opinionated. And then obviously, if you talk to lots of people and takes a lot of viewpoints in, it kind of ties you in knots. And it took us a while to kind of hone in on what is actually necessary, what works in the real world, not theory. We've done this in the real world. What works in the real world, and what is actually just fluff that doesn't actually serve you? And trying to pair it back to that was incredibly difficult. I'm not saying we've actually achieved that. You'll be the judge of that, but that's what we were attempting to do.
Yeah, I can understand. So sort of, what do you hope for the book? What do you see or what do you judge as a good outcome for this book?
I'd be delighted if 1% more transformations are successful. I mean, if you read the research, somewhere between 70 and 90% of transformations fail. That's even higher when you look at agile transformations. So I'd be delighted if just a very small proportion, my high dream is more a large proportion, but even just a small proportion of these succeed, because we all know a transformation done right materially changes people's lives inside the organization. People can work better, they're happier, the company makes more money, or it's more profitable, or it delights its customers, or whatever the objective is for the organization. Good things should happen if a transformation is done well. That would be my dream for the book anyway.
Yeah, I think for many years now as a coach, and there's a few people here who I've worked with will probably have heard me say this before, but success for me in terms of any organization I go into change is, would I be happy for my kids to work there? That's my measure of success, of whether it's a better place to work in. And I think if you just focus on the sort of the pure coachy, that can get a little bit come by my lord, and it's just all about everyone being happy, but that's not sustainable. It's got to be around creating sustainable organizations, but not in a way that absolutely mullers its workforce. And so it's having this sort of balanced approach and bringing, I think which is one of the intents, without getting into any of the frameworks or the methodologies behind Agile. That's the intent of Agile, is to create a sustainable organization that can actually deliver products in a way that people are actually fulfilled. I think that's where I've seen it struggle is there are methodologies or frameworks for adopting or for Agile to be used, but none of them have anything for how do you adopt it. And it's sort of left to the devices of coaches trying to figure stuff out by themselves or coming in too low and not being able to sort of have a consistent methodology for the adoption phase of these things. So certainly specifically within Agile and given the audience, worth focusing on is how do we make more Agile adoption successful, regardless of your poison of choice.
Yeah. So why, I mean, I actually get asked the question quite a lot by more junior Scrum Masters and Agile coaches on their journey. And we get asked this question quite regularly on Agile London by the audience to the speakers, and ask, you know, what literature is there out there that can really help me on my journey within Agile? So, I mean, why is yours different from anyone else? How is it different from anyone else? And, you know, is it something that you would recommend to somebody at the early stages?
Of course, I think yes.
Yeah, ideally yes, but I think a lot of it.
All of the above.
I think it depends, because if you look at the responsibilities of a Scrum Master, they tend to be more team focused, and that would be within an initiative or one project within a wider transformation. I think potentially if you start looking at Agile coaches and senior Agile coaches who are potentially responsible for the initial design and implementation of an Agile adoption, then I think actually HERO is particularly useful in framing those conversations and allowing us to have a more successful outcome. I think just I'm looking at, I won't name names, but I think the person will know who I'm going to speak about. A particular client of ours years ago, when I joined, I kept on asking, why are you doing this transformation? Like, what do you want from this? And after about 4 or 5 weeks, my boss took me aside and said, you really need to stop asking that question. I'm like, okay, but can I ask why? He goes, well, it's a good question, and we probably should have asked it at the start of the change, but now you're making me look foolish, you need to stop. And I think that's, you know, Riff was talking about the frustration. That is the you know, the sort of a lot of the energy that's been put into this book, to saying, how do we stop those conversations and actually set off on the right foot when we do these, you know, often multi-million-dollar cost profiles in terms of Agile adoptions, let alone the disruption to people's jobs and careers. And it's just not done particularly well.
I think the two things that I think are a little different in terms of the other things that we've looked at is it's this merging of the kind of practitioner-led team-level approach with the more senior executive kind of methodologies, and trying to bring those together, the best of both worlds. You can have this, oh, well, why do I need to do a business case? Oh, I just need to do experimentation. And the other side, you've got someone saying, well, just hit your business case. And you can try and bring these together in a pragmatic way where you need both sides. You need people who are sponsoring, signing off money, who are unblocking the organization, and you need people who can actually deliver, get out their way, just give high-performing teams the opportunity to deliver. You need both these parts of the puzzle. So I think for me, one of the biggest things we've come up with is this sense of what we call dual accountability. I've seen this, I've been guilty of it at times. As the kind of governing team over a transformation, you're constantly telling your teams, deliver, why is it red? Do more, do faster, go, do better. And the teams who are delivering, but they're saying, well, I would, if you would just change X, Y, and Z. Maybe it's meeting rooms, maybe it's people not turning up to meetings, maybe it's more budget, maybe it's a process that needs to change, maybe you need to change the way hiring or finance is accounted, whatever it might be. So we've got this sense of what we're calling two-way accountability, where it's absolutely for the leadership to say, are we on track? Are we going to hit our benefits case? How are we doing on the money? But it's equally important for the teams to be able to hold leadership accountable, to say, I will do all of those things, but you need to help me because the delivery of value has been blocked. It's outside of my control. I don't have the authority to do it. As the leadership team, you have to do this for me. So I think having those two pieces is quite unique. I've not come across something like that before. Such common sense, right? I mean, this is not brain surgery. This is such common sense that if a team gets blocked, hitting them with a big stick makes no sense, 0 sense, but we all do it. We've all seen it. Every single one of you will have seen this. It doesn't matter that it's nonsensical.
Let's not include me in that we, by the way. That was you, not me.
We've all seen it or done it or been part of it, whatever it might be. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing for me is it's very value focused. Agile is very important. I've been doing Agile since I was a developer in 1999, even before Agile as a kind of philosophy came out. It's just common sense, right? A lot of the principles. So I'm a big advocate. However, you have to be clear. If you're spending the organization's money to do something, build a product, do an Agile transformation, scale your team, whatever it might be, the flip side of that is you have to deliver some value back to the organization. It might be efficiency, you're doing things faster. It might be quality, you're delivering things better. It could be that you're going to make more money because it's going to generate more sales, a feature development. So it's having that real focus on tying everything you do back to value somehow. And you know what, if you do that, you're much more likely to get your own way. It's much easier to say, hey, can I have this resource? Or can I have a meeting room? And by the way, that will deliver $2 million worth of value. Oh, okay, well, that's a no-brainer. As opposed to, please, can I have a meeting room? Why? And then you're not really likely to get it. If you can tie things back to value, you're much more likely to get what you want, and you're much more likely to deliver successfully.
So, I mean, you've touched on it. I mean, how do you both define a transformation?
I mean, that's a big question, isn't it? I mean, what we found was there's no kind of clear definition of transformation. So we tried to come up with one, and it's a bit of a mouthful. So kind of bear with me, and I'll touch on a couple of points. I'm sure Cuan, you'll dive in. But we define a transformation as a large change program initiated due to a dissatisfaction with current business results that cannot be rectified through business as usual, which has a positive material impact on enterprise value. Okay, that's a really long sentence, but in essence, there's 4 parts. It's a large scale change program. It's a big change. It's not a, oh, I want to increase sales 1%. It has to be a big change. The second thing is, it's usually initiated because you've got a dissatisfaction with your current business results. Your profits are too low, your costs are too high, your customers are unhappy. It can't be delivered through business as usual. So you can't just have your existing teams do it. You have to create a temporary separate structure, and it has to have a positive material impact on enterprise value, which is a fancy way of saying the organization value, that the kind of valuation of the company, the return you're generating should be bigger than the amount of money you're spending. If you're spending 10 million, you should be delivering 30, 40, 50, 100 million pounds worth of value. So that's what we think a transformation is.
Just on that last point, actually, which I think is really important, it'd be interesting to do. I don't know whether you have a poll option on this Zoom call this evening, but the amount of money that I've seen spent on Agile adoptions in particular, and it's been mainly focused about, does the model get adopted with the assumption that that's going to give me some value, rather than it being explicitly about value. We've seen, I know actually, and I will call him out, Nigel, myself and Nigel worked on an account years ago where actually there was a centralized team that was procuring environments for teams that had a massive lead time. And it would have been far cheaper and more impactful if they just either hired more people into that team or disbanded that team and put one of those people in every of the delivery teams. It would have actually had a lot more value and impact to the company. But they were quite militant about, no, the value was the adoption of the model. And I think their actual promotion and rhetoric was, we're the fastest adoption of SAFe in the world. It was like, who cares? That is not what success should be. You could argue that they spent a lot of money, productivity went down, time to market went down, and yet they call it a success. So I think for us, it's really getting militant about value and the impact that we're having. I think also often as well, where we've been, for the last 3 years, myself and Arif have been building teams and building companies, not just sort of coaching them from the outside. And when you're actually on the hook for delivering value, one of the changes I've noticed over the last 3 years is a lot of Agile coaches are not held accountable for the delivery of value. And actually, I think our jobs would be a lot better if we were, because we would actually have authority to do something and say, well, going back to Arif's point, saying, well, you want me to deliver this thing, but you won't change this thing. And so if you can have those conversations and we are held accountable, but we have the authority or the influence to change things, then I think we can have a bigger impact in the companies that we work for.
Yeah, I think I get that. One more thing on that, just I think it's really, really useful. Is we built a team, a software delivery product team from scratch in the role we're currently in. We went from 0 to 40 people in a few months. And the reason we were very successful, I mean, I'd love to say it was our skill and our ability, but I don't think that was the case. That was a very small part to play. What was really useful, really valuable, was the organization we worked in was incredibly flexible about how we worked. We changed finance process, we changed HR and hiring processes, we changed security processes, we changed budget processes. The organization that we're currently working in is set up for the delivery of value. It's not set up for the adherence to a process. And everyone from back office to front office is there for the delivery of client value. And we were astonished. I mean, when I was in government, God, try changing the kind of budget process there. I mean, that's a 1,000-year endeavor. It was so surprising how quickly you can move when everyone is aligned to this common goal and when people are flexible enough to be able to change their processes. And it took some education, and we hit some roadblocks, and we had to spend time explaining why we needed the budget process to change, why it was not reasonable to predict software delivery 3 years in advance. What's your roadmap and budget for the next 3 years? I make it up, but you know what, it's going to change. And is that okay? Well, okay, so long as you tell us in good time, yes. Okay, great. I'm very happy to be held accountable to that. So long as you know that I'm guessing, and every month I go further in, it's less of a guess and I've got more certainty. So you can really, really move mountains when the organization is a little bit more flexible and kind of organized around this delivery of value. Sorry, Alex.
No, I was just going to say, it's just the old adage of everyone pulling in the same direction and sort of really working towards one common goal. It's, yeah. I guess in any sort of walk of life, anything you do, that is the best way for an organization, large or small, of individuals to work. So tell me, how does Agile fit with HERO, or does it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what we mean by the word Agile. I'm going to choose to interpret it in the adoption of Agile as a significant impact on the organization. But you're not talking at, 1 or 2 teams. You're talking at significant change to how an organization runs. I think most Agile adoptions are not uber clear on the impact that they want to have, and then cherry picking the bits from particular methodologies or frameworks that's going to have the biggest impact possible. So I think if you look at the earlier part of our framework around designing and using those steps, it facilitates the appropriate and better designing of the adoption of any Agile transformation.
Okay, and then so there's multiple frameworks that I'm aware of and that are in the sort of community. Does it work? Is it sort of cross framework? Does it work with all the frameworks? SAFe and LESS, etc.
Yeah,
I mean, sorry, Arif, do you want to go?
I was going to say we've look. It's like religion to some people. Like whether we use SAFe or LESS or DAD or Scrum or Kanban, and we've stayed well out of that. Because you will choose a methodology for delivering software or delivering products that you think is appropriate to your organization. And you know what? You're probably right. We're not going to write a better framework for that. These frameworks, there's many frameworks out there that are amazing, and we're not going to better them. Ours is much more about how do you run a large-scale transformation. Remember, a lot of these frameworks are designed for perhaps 1 or 2 teams. Remember, a transformation is a large-scale change program. So we've kind of tried to take this upper level to say, if you're going to do the adoption of Agile, why are you doing it? What's it going to deliver to the organization? How should you be reporting? How should you be doing your business cases? How should you keep stakeholders engaged? How should the teams be governing themselves? What should those governance meetings look like? At the day-to-day team level, use whatever methodology you think is appropriate to you. So this is kind of like taking a step up. Remember, this is kind of exec plus Agile. We're trying to take it a little level up because you kind of need that flexible framework to which to run in some things that are less certain. And if you're building a bridge or if you're moving buildings, that's a lot of certainty. Software delivery is inherently uncertain. So you need a kind of more flexible framework from which to use and adopt. Although, what would you say? Anything else to add on that, Cuan?
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts to that. I think the part that Arif talked, which is about the adoption of Agile, but then within HERO, when you're delivering one of the projects, we quite often see the initiatives or projects being product delivery related. Obviously, Agile rears its head there again in terms of whether you're going to use LESS, SAFe, Nexus, whatever the framework you want. But by having this dual accountability mechanism wrapped around your product delivery, you have a formal channel, which again, most of the frameworks do have some form of escalation, but it tends to get left off. And this is formalized, this is a non-negotiable part of our model, where if you need to have this accountability feedback, where the people who are responsible for delivering the value have the ability to hold the people who can change the organization accountable for actually changing it, which, you know, as again, it's eminently sensible and common sense, but it's very rare to see it. Alex, just one thing, actually, I tried to share my screen to show the framework. I just sent you an email because you've disabled screen sharing, but I don't know whether you want to put that up, because I realize we're talking about something that, you know, it might be useful for people just to bring it to life.
You're good to go. I've just given you the access, Cuan, no problem. Feel free to, yeah, there you go. Anything more you want to say on that?
Yeah, we can see.
If everybody can see that, I'll just sort of talk very briefly about it. So the orange section is all around transformation design. So step one is getting very, very clear on what outcome you're doing. We then have a second phase, which is around generating what we call an enterprise map, loosely based on value stream mapping, understanding the current performance of the organization. This allows you then to figure out, you know, we've worked with some massive organizations. You just don't have the time to interview everybody and really get that basis understanding, doing targeted analysis to close some of the gaps on that. Then building your transformation plan. So this is like your initial set of initiatives that are going to help you deliver the outcome. So some of the transformations we work on, for example, we worked with a charity in England, which currently helps about 2,500 children a year, and they wanted to transform to be able to impact 11,500 children a year. So figuring out what were they going to do, what were the initiatives, the projects they had to do in order to get that extra 7,000 children helped and supported in an annual basis. And then you have initiation. So initiation is basically where you're going, getting formal board approval, appointing the initial roles, and most importantly, putting in some form of metric tracking capability, because most organizations don't actually know their current performance and they don't know how to measure it properly. And therefore, if you're going to try and shift things, how can you actually say whether you're getting better, worse, or indifferent? And it's just having that, certainly as external consultants, having that sort of protection to say, hey, things are getting better or things are not getting better, and why. Riv, I don't know if you want to speak a bit about delivery.
I mean, delivery is pretty straightforward. We haven't veered too far from kind of normal best practice. The transformation is split into work streams, kind of logical groupings of initiatives. It's managed via a transformation Kanban, so people can see very visibly the work to be done and the progress and the state of each of them. Initiatives are projects and they move through a process of being delivered. Each one of them has to tie back to the transformation outcome. Remember, tying everything you do back to the delivery of value. When it's delivered, it is done and it kind of increments towards where you're trying to go. We have a couple of kind of key governance forums. One is called the Transformation Accountability Meeting, the TAM. That's the most senior governance forum in the transformation. It's led by the transformation lead. All of the kind of key governing people are in it, the workstream leads, the board or stakeholders, senior stakeholders are there. And it's the one meeting that this transformation lead uses to kind of steer the transformation. Are we on track? Does our business case still stack up? Has anything materially changed? Remember, everything we've said in design is a guess. It's an educated guess, but it will change. So does the transformation case still stack up? If it doesn't, should we stop? That's a good outcome. Let's not fall into the sunk cost fallacy of spending 100 million, even though we know it's not going to deliver anything. Let's early reassess and whether it actually still makes sense to do so. So it's a very senior meeting to steer the transformation. The other one is the workstream accountability meeting, the WAM. That's at a workstream level. It's much more focused around delivery. All of the initiatives and projects that I'm running, how are they doing? What am I learning? Can we do anything better? Am I blocked? Do I need to raise blockers to the transformation lead? That kind of moves on to the next point, which is the blockers backlog. Remember the two-way accountability, that's where this is tracked. If you raise something that is blocking the delivery of value, it goes onto the blockers backlog. And that is the transformations lead's highest priority to unblock the delivery of value. And at the transformation accountability meeting, all of the workstream leads will be saying to the transformation lead, hey, we're still blocked. What are you doing about it? Remember the two-way accountability, both up and down. Again, you can use any methodology you want there. We don't really have a strong preference. We have some principles that we think you should adhere to, but all of the people we're preaching to the converted on this call, at least. Sometimes when we go into organizations, they've never heard of Agile. Isn't it that heretic thing where you just guess and make everything up? We have to educate them, but for obviously this audience, we don't need to do that.
So I've had a question come in. The question is, in the design stage, there is a transformation plan. That plan looks a little like a classic waterfall Gantt chart. How do you square the circle of delivering such a complex objective with such a complicated waterfall style artifact, such as an old school plan? Surely you can't achieve Agile using waterfall processes.
Well, I personally would disagree. And this is something I talk to executive and leadership teams all the time. So you can have a plan. You can have a very detailed plan. You know that it's wrong. You can't see the future, especially if you're at day zero. You know you're going to get a lot more information throughout the process. But it's really important to do the work at the start. If you cannot make a business case stack up, which is, look, let's be honest, a lot of it's completely made up. If you can't make that stack up, why do you think it's suddenly going to stack up when you go into delivery? So the transformation plan is our best guess based on the best analysis we can do, knowing that we can't see the future, knowing that we're going to be wrong. It's our best guess to try and make it stack up. And you know what? Doing business cases are really important. If you want to get sign off from executives and private equity houses and your investors and your board and analysts, the kind of people that I would have to deal with when I'm facing off to try and spend money, it's really important to have a well thought through business case. The flip side is you don't want to be held accountable to it to the letter of the law. Like you can't say, well, 5 years ago you did that business case. Well, why haven't you delivered? So I think you can have that detailed plan. You can have that detailed waterfall, so long as at every transformation accountability meeting, which is monthly, you're reassessing it. You're saying, well, we thought we were going to get 10 million. Now we're going to get 5 million. Whoops, that's a big problem. That's a big hole. What should we do about it? Much better to know that you're off track and do something about it rather than kind of just guess, would be my view. I don't know if that's actually answering the question. Kuan, have you got any points of view on that?
Yeah, I just want to change the share. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
So the actual visualization in the chart maps out to this software that we also go with the framework. So if you look at this, this is a model of a transformation we did that was taking, the basically was a cost reduction of £16.5 million out of a company's operating budgets. And each of these boxes relates to a particular project or initiative within the program. So this visualization, I think someone referred to as a waterfall, we call this the bridge, which shows you across each work stream, how are you going to get to your overarching goal. So you can see here, we've got nearly $1 million under our targets. And you can very easily just quickly change this across different visualizations, different countries, and seeing where your problems are. So the visualization here is purely about understanding how are you getting from A to B within your transformation. So when we just, the scope of most transformations, even if you're doing a pure Agile transformation, if you sit down and actually understand what problem you're trying to fix, it tends to go much broader than just the software delivery teams. So having these sorts of visualizations and understanding what do we need to change in HR, what do we need to change in legal, what do we need to change in other parts of the organization in different countries, different regions, this visualization helps bring people on that journey so they can understand it in an easy to digest way.
So, help me, I've got a much more uneducated mind than yours. Are all Agile adoptions a transformation? And then off the back of that, how can HERO help in Agile adoptions?
Sorry, can you say that again, Alex? I didn't quite hear that.
Yeah, sorry, is my audio good now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I lack the knowledge that you two have in this. So, I mean, tell me in more detail, are all Agile adoptions a transformation? And, then off the back of that, how can HERO help in Agile adoptions?
I believe they could be. Obviously, a lot of it depends on the size and the scale. If you're looking at doing this sort of 1 or 2 teams just to improve your product delivery, I don't think so. If you look at our definition of a transformation, it's something that has to materially change the value of the organization. And it's not something that you can do with your basically incumbent workforce. So if you've got an Agile adoption where you're fundamentally changing the way you work, you're bringing in a lot of external experts like we have on the course today, that sort of smells very much of a transformation, a significant investment. You're talking millions of dollars. I definitely think you should have the rigor around that to appropriately spend that money and to make sure that we're getting a disproportionate return on that investment. I think, some of the transformations I've been involved with from people on the call here, sort of $5-10 million a year. I mean, that's not chump change, and that should be generating $50-100 million worth of value. Otherwise, you shouldn't really necessarily be doing it, because it's too high risk. Agile adoptions are not guaranteed. It's a bumpy road. It's challenging. It's expensive, and it's full of risks. And so we want to be making sure that the reward upside is disproportional to the cost profile of it.
Yeah, I mean, just one other thing to add on that. I think I totally agree with all of that. I think one of the big things for me is, if nothing else, if you took nothing else from this framework at all, it's very, very clear on what it is you're trying to achieve. And that should be some kind of value to the organization. So if we went into a very large investment bank, like multi-billion-dollar investment bank, and they'd spend, I think, 30 or 40 million on their Agile adoption. And we went in 6 months later and they said, look, it's not working. We're under pressure. We need some help. Well, okay, fine. No problem. We can help you. What are you trying to do? And they're like, we're trying to make things better. Great objective. What does that mean? They have no idea. So they're spending money. Goodness knows who signed off that business case, but they're spending money. They have no idea what they're doing. The organization obviously doesn't understand it. The teams don't understand it. The leaders and executives don't understand it. Of course, that's going to be a failure. I mean, what else could it be? So if you did nothing else, you just got really clear, and all we did is help them. It took us half a day. It's not even hard, right? Anyone on this call could do it. So what are you trying to do? And actually what they were trying to do is they worked out that the software quality was not good enough. They had to improve the quality because the team, the investment bankers using the software, were getting really antsy. The bugs, they were losing trades, they were losing money. That's really quantifiable. Now we can do something. Now we can work out what's the biggest impact initiatives that we can do to improve quality. Very clear now. Everyone's really clear. And even better, we got them to a point with, well, where is your quality now and where do you want to get to? And then everything from that can flow. If that's the only thing you took from this framework, I'd be personally delighted.
So what software should you use to manage a transformation?
Strange you asked that. No.
Not Excel. Let's just say that. I mean, we see, look, we're dealing with transformations typically that are in the tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And we see a lot of big consulting houses spending, let's just say 2 to 6% of the budget on Excel. It's taking easy maths, 100 million pounds, you're talking 2 million to 6 million spent on managing Excel, which is just complete madness. So, you could use anything, obviously.
What's the stats for? I think we're some of the anecdotal research we're seeing at the moment is that around 6 to 7%, maybe even higher, of transformation budgets are spent on the administrative side of it. So that's literally, you're spending millions of dollars on some of these very large transformations on people updating Excel because it's not centralized. So the administration of exporting that data to generate PowerPoint reports for all the governance meetings, and it's, unfortunately, it heavily suffers from what we call watermelon reporting, where it's artificially green, but it's really red on the inside. And, you're getting all this, very poor data going up to management, trying to make some really big decisions. And it needs to change.
Yeah.
So another question has just come in. Providing value is great and makes a lot of sense. How do you estimate value and or risk for effects which are very hard to quantify? Let's say employee retention. If a company has a high employee churn, what are the costs, risks and benefits associated? And how do you quantify the status quo versus the desired outcome?
Well, the simplest thing to do in that instance, I would say, is say your churn is 20%, making it up, and you want to get it to 10%. That for me is kind of good enough in the first instance to understand where you are and where you want to go. But then obviously, as the person who's asking the question very astutely mentions, is how do you actually tie that back to some kind of value? How do you actually work out the monetary benefit of that? Now, obviously, that's where you need some kind of attribution model, but just off the top of my head, you can work out the cost of, well, how much we pay into recruitment companies or retainers or kind of entry fees for the 20% of people. You can work out how long typically someone takes to get up to speed. Obviously, there's a curve, isn't there? Someone comes in, they're actually value destructive because they're learning, they don't know what they're doing. It takes other people's time. You can kind of work that out as well. You can work out the kind of negative sentiment of people leaving. Don't underestimate that. Someone leaves under a cloud, they go on Glassdoor or Facebook, this company's rubbish. Maybe customers see that, so you can quantify some kind of reputational damage. You can quantify the disruption to the team. If you're a team of 10 people and 5 leave, that's a big disruption to your delivery. So I think it depends who's leaving and why they're leaving, but I think there's always a way to find some kind of attribution model back to value in some instances. Again, I can't to this specific case, but there's a few off the top of my head.
I mean, sort of a slight parody of the 5 whys. I would be asking the question: so what? So what if you have a 20% churn? What's the risk? What's the impact of that? So it's trying to drive whatever the starting conversation is into a true impact. If you've got a churn rate of 20% and you're basically only hiring 2%, you're probably not going to have a workforce within a year. So that's complete company destruction. That's a pretty big motivational factor. So I think you need to take it, evolve the conversation a little bit back to well, what's the impact of what that thing you're talking about? Because it's a great question, and it tends to be where people sort of start, but I think you want to scratch a little bit deeper on it and understand the impact of what that is, and if that's the actual thing you want to change or not.
It's a good question.
Thank you. Again, if anybody else does have some more questions, do keep them coming. So on the wider picture here, possibly away from software development, can your book be used for more than just Agile? Is there a bigger picture, a bigger message sent out here from this book?
I mean, from my perspective, when the kind of transformations that we typically do, it usually falls into kind of a few camps. It's usually cost reduction, especially in kind of COVID times. People are controlling what they can control. They can't control things like when we're back on the high street, what will happen with the economy, will my customers come back to work, in which case they'll be buying preps or whatever it is. They're controlling the things they can control, like cost. Cost is something very controllable. So we see a lot of cost takeout at the moment. So obviously the transformation framework could help with cost takeout. Customer satisfaction is another big one. So we have a low number of customer satisfaction, NPS score maybe, or eNPS if it's employee net promoter score. We want to improve that. That's another way we typically see large transformations do. And then there's obvious ones around sales and profit. So we want to increase our sales by opening new markets or getting more market share in the markets that we're in, or we want to get my profit by a combination of sales and cost or whatever it might be. So yes, this is absolutely beyond software delivery. It's just that we're passionate about software and we're software people. We're product and agile people. So obviously that's where a lot of our grounding and our heritage came from. But now it can absolutely be used in other types of transformation. It's just that we're more keen and knowledgeable in software delivery.
Cuan, do you have any more to add to that?
No, not really. I mean, we try to not tie the framework to any particular solution. So in the same way, even though everybody here is involved in Agile, at some level, everybody here is also a change agent. You're bringing around change inside an organization. And while you may have more experience with product delivery or software teams, a lot of your skills are translatable to other industries. So there may be a learning curve, but you can lift and shift a lot of that experience into other areas. And in the same way, I think the framework is agnostic to the type of transformation, as long as the transformation is directly attributable to some sense of value.
Fantastic. So we're actually on fairly limited time sort of frames this evening. I have come to the end of my questioning. So how can people on this call find out more?
Obviously, we're happy to share our email addresses, no problem. But HEROTransformation.com is our website. It is a prototype. It is not the finished article, so don't judge us too much. We had to put it up very quickly for the book launch, which is coming out on the 22nd of September. So it will get better. But that's the best way to contact us. Have a little look. There's some downloadable references there as well if you want to have a look at it. But yeah, best thing to do is email us if you have questions, LinkedIn, Twitter, email. All of the above. We're available. We're really happy to debate and talk about these things. It's our passion. We love it. We'll talk to anyone about these topics all day if you want to. I'm sure you won't want to, but if you wanted to, all day.
The one thing I'd add also is anybody who thinks they have a book inside of them, think
do it.
very, very, very long, hard before you undertake that journey. It's maybe a conversation for another time. It's a really long journey.
Very long, and more and more and more, and it takes forever. But please go ahead.
I used to have hair when I started. That's how long.
So we've actually got 3 minutes left. Another question's come in, and then we will have to wrap up. So just be mindful of your answers. Unfortunately, we might have to almost time box you. Given that only 50% of Fortune 500 companies are forecast to still be around in 10 years' time, isn't a tipping point / driver to engage in transformation?
Yes.
100%.
answer. Transformation is going to be one of the core capabilities of all organizations, and COVID has just shown that, right? The companies that were agile enough to transform and kind of be nimble enough to transform either their operating processes, their propositions, their employees, their workplaces, their practices, processes, they're the ones that are going to survive.
I think I'd also say, you know, in terms of the audience, I mean, I was a contractor for nearly 20 years, and I've been permanent for the last sort of 2 years. With the COVID lockdown, that changed everybody's life in terms of where you put on furlough. You know, a lot of jobs were stopped, and I think, you know, one of the hopes is also that people will, you know, people themselves as individuals, not just the big companies, are going to have to change and pivot into how they offer and be very creative in how they do that. So I think that one of a sort of a selfish aspiration is that people in the Agile community might start looking to HERO as a way to diversify in terms of what they do, because I think a lot of people in the community have phenomenal skills that can be utilized in slightly other areas rather than just pure Agile transformations.
Perfect. And that draws us to a close. I just want to say, Arif, Cuan, thank you so much for joining us tonight and being part of a really sort of conversational Agile London. It's been fantastic, and would love to have you back again in the not so distant future to give us a bit of an update on how everything is going. So just to you both, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much to our audience for joining us tonight. Make sure you do all go and check out the HERO Transformation Playbook. It's well worth exploring, especially by the sound of things this evening. So, and I'm sure very much that Arif and Cuan would be happy to continue conversations with you all if you do reach out to them on LinkedIn. Again, as I say, just from myself, thank you to everyone who gets involved continuously, week in, week out on these. They wouldn't happen without all of us pulling in the same direction to make them happen. So I do really appreciate it. So thank you very much to everyone. Arif, Cuan, once more time, thank you very much indeed. Make sure you check out the HERO Transformation Playbook, and I wish you all a lovely evening.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, everybody. Thank you.
See you later.
See you later.